days to go until the Tour de France.
Oh, you think you know? Wait.
But before that, we have another action-packed racing news show. We will be looking forward to the European Championships coming up this week, to the National Championships which took place last week, plus rider transfers, positive tests, and all the other racing-related news too. First up, we have to start with the Men's National Road Race Championships from France. And let's start by reliving the end of that spectacular race.
Demar's going for it as well, head down. Philippe, I think, is running out of juice here, and Demar's going to show his strength. Can they come round him? That's the big question. Coquart's going to the centre of the road. He's going to finish second, I think. Oh, and it's going to be battle plan delivered. That was supreme.
How good was that? Arnaud Démare, cool, calm, collected. I wonder where he gets that from.
Allez, no!
That, of course, was Marc Madiot, Groupama FDJ team manager, celebrating Démare's, or Nono's, third national title. Now, firstly, I love that video. Secondly, I love Marc Madiot. And thirdly, I love the way in which Démare won his title. So he had 17 riders in his team to work for him, and even then, they were outnumbered. With two World Tour teams and a cluster of top-tier pro-continental teams, France has a unique-looking national championships, with a couple of the squads fielding 19-man teams. But back to the way that Démare won it. Now, the pressure on your shoulders when you've got 16 teammates willing to sacrifice their own chances for you must be immense, I'd imagine. To then get to the finale and see a rider like Julian Alaphilippe going on the attack must add to that pressure even more. Démare could basically watch the gold medal and French tricolour jersey riding away from him, but he didn't panic. Just as he'd done so successfully at the Tour de Wallonie last week, he stayed calm. And then when the gap opened, he did not go into the red. He rode at the pace that he knew he could sustain, and with the help of Brian Coquart, he brought Alaphilippe back. But the job was far from complete by that point. The next group on the road were fast closing in, but Démare was the man with the responsibility on his shoulders of keeping the front group clear. So he had to ride at a pace which was fast enough to ensure they weren't caught, but not so fast that he tired himself out too much to win the final sprint to the line. And let's not forget here that Julian Alaphilippe and Brian Coquart are no slouches when it comes to sprinting. Then, when Alaphilippe went with 200 metres to go, Démare reacted immediately. And given the form that he's in right now, the result then was never really in doubt. And I don't think I've ever seen Démare look better than he does right now, in sprints or indeed up the climbs too. I mean, who could have imagined that when he was locked in a hotel room in Abu Dhabi with Raymond Sinkeldam at the start of this year? So he now has 3 national elite titles in his palmarès, and so it's only Jean Stablinski who has more than that, with 4. And you wouldn't put it past him equalling or even surpassing that record at some point in his career. And you also wonder, with the form he's in, whether Madiot will make a last-minute spot available for Démare at the upcoming Tour de France. Now, he's already replaced Nasser Bouhanni in the French squad for the European Championships on Wednesday, but Groupama had always planned on putting everything into the overall classification with Thibaut Pinot. However, it would be a real shame not to see Démare on the start line. I mean, he could even challenge for the green jersey against Peter Sagan with his current level. Tough call, really, that one for Madiot. But moving on, we had an equally or perhaps even more popular winner in the women's race. Here's the finale of that one.
The French national title. Audrey Cordon-Rago can't quite believe it. She has managed to fend off the might of FDJ and the team of Arkea.
Brilliant stuff. If at first you don't succeed, try and try again. Audrey Cordon-Rago achieved her first top 10 at the French National Road Championships at her first time of trying. That was way back in 2009. Since then, she has come close on a number of occasions, and then finally on Saturday, her dream came true. And the emotion as she crossed the finish line showed just how much it meant to her. Thoroughly deserved. And I also love the advice that Pierre Rolland gave to her the previous evening. So apparently he said, "Audrey, you have to race with a cold head and a warm heart," a sentiment which she kept repeating to herself during the race on Saturday. And it clearly worked. Well done, Audrey. That was absolutely fantastic to see. Before we move on, Rago had missed out on the time trial by 5 seconds to Juliette Labou of Team Sunweb, whilst in the men's event, just 6 seconds separated last year's winner, Benjamin Thomas of Groupama FDJ, from the new champion, Remy Cavagna of the Koenig Quickstep. Right, we shall move over to Italy now, which featured this cobbled climb towards the finish. That was Pipo Puzzato's course design, which I thought worked incredibly well. Now, the undulating nature of the overall course did see the group drastically reduced from the 140 or so who took to the start, but try as they might, the climbers were unable to shake off some of the sprinters. And so, it was a sprint finish of sorts which decided the race. Colbrelli of Bahrain McLaren kicked first, Davide Ballerini managed to get round him before the finish line, but so too did Giacomo Nizzolo, who took his second national title in what's been arguably his best season to date, despite the lack of racing. He, Ballerini and Italian manager Davide Cassani are now in a car en route to Brittany, ready for the European Championships, which will take place on Wednesday. That is live on Race Pass, of course. In fact, before we run through the rest of the National Championships, I think I'll run you through what we've got coming up for you this week on Race Pass. So today, in fact, it will probably already be finished by the time this comes out, but we've got the men's and the women's European Individual Time Trial Championships. But don't forget that if you missed it live, those races remain on the app on demand, so you can watch them whenever you want, or indeed, you can watch short highlights if you prefer a shorter summary. And then tomorrow it is the Grand Prix Plouay, which is the next round of the Women's World Tour, and then the Bretagne Classic, which is the next round of the men's. Then on Wednesday, it's the Men's European Road Race Championships. Thursday, it's the Women's. Friday, it's the Mixed Relay. And then on Saturday, double bubble, La Course and the Tour de France. And I honestly cannot bloody wait for it. Territory restrictions do apply to those races, so please double check what is available where you are. As ever, we will put a link in the description below so that you can check the calendar of races where you are. However, if you don't have access to the live or on-demand coverage, you will have access to shorter highlights, plus the weekly World of Cycling show and a daily analysis show. The guests on that are quite something. So we've got Bradley Wiggins, who of course has won the Tour before, Sean Kelly, 4-time a green jersey winner at the Tour, and Brian Smith, the double national champion, and they'll all be giving us their insights on the breakaway. I'm going to be hosting that one in the absence of Ola Chenoy, but she will be bringing us more insight and interviews from the Netherlands. Do not miss it. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Now, speaking of the Tour de France, I'll be chatting to William Fotheringham on the World of Cycling this week about that race. And we've also got our big Tour de France preview coming out tomorrow, right here on GCN Racing and on Race Pass. So stay tuned for that. Right, let's get back to the National Championships now. There was no Italian women's road race, that's coming up later on this year, but former road race champion Elisa Longo Borghini of Trek Segafredo took the women's individual time trial, whilst it was Filippo Ganna who successfully defended in the men's. Over in Spain, now Movistar are usually the big favourites there, but they had a drastically weakened squad this year. They'd taken the decision to keep the Tour de France team in France rather than risk crossing the border, and so it was a wide open race. And it was yet another very dramatic finale. Jesus Herrada, twice a winner beforehand, went away on the final climb and looked to have it sewn up. That was until Luis Leon Sanchez of Astana gradually clawed his way back up to him with about 1 kilometre of the race remaining. And so we were all set for a big sprint finish between the two of them, but unfortunately Herrada's gears had other ideas and he ended up crossing the line on foot in 15th place. For Sanchez though, that's his first national elite title and he's been waiting for it even longer than Cordon Rago. That was his 13th time of trying and he'll now wear the Spanish flag with pride at the upcoming Tour de France. In the women's event, Mavi Garcia backed up her recent stellar form by doubling up in Spain. She took the road race solo by 2 minutes and 11 seconds and had won the time trial by a margin of not much less than that the previous day. The men's had been won very convincingly, I might add, by Pello Bilbao, who will now go on to support Mikel Landa for Bahrain McLaren at the Tour de France. Now the big news in the Netherlands was that Annemiek van Vleuten's winning streak finally came to an end. She hadn't been beaten in any race that she'd started since the World Time Trial Championships last September in Harrogate, but that run was finally broken by Anna van der Breggen on Saturday. A strong break had gone clear just before the midway point of the race, and without a team to support her and chase down that break, there was very little that Van Vleuten could do. Amazingly though, that was the first time that Van der Breggen has won her elite national road title, and she'll now wear that jersey pretty much until the end of her career, because she recently announced that she'll hang up her wheels after the Tokyo Olympics. In the men's race, there was no surprise really. It was a complete display of dominance from Mathieu van der Poel. He attacked the lead group with about 44 kilometres of the race remaining, never to be seen again. That is his second national elite road title in the last 3 years. As ever, there were a few too many national titles over the weekend to be able to run through every single one of them, but Marcel Meissen of Alpecin-Phoenix managed to get the better of Pascal Ackermann to win the German national championships. There, Lisa Brennauer successfully defended her crown. Christine Macherus took her 11th elite road title in a row up in Luxembourg, although Bob Jungels' run of 5 came to an end in the men's. He was outdone by young Kevin Genietz. Kasper Asgreen kept the Danish jersey in the De Koning Quick-Step team, while Sven-Erik Bystrom took the win in the Norwegian champs. That was won in a photo finish with Jonas Iversby Hedeberg. A photo finish that was so close to call, in fact, that Hedeberg's team have put in an official protest, so we'll see where that one ends up. And finally, Juraj Sagan won the men's road race in Slovakia. So that's 4 national titles so far for Juraj in his career and 6 for Peter, which means they've kept it in the family now for the last 10 years in a row. Remarkable stuff. The biggest news though last week was the fact that neither Chris Froome nor Geraint Thomas made the final 8-man Tour de France roster. I mean, I think we all thought there was a decent chance that Froome wouldn't make the cut, still being in recovery mode really from last year's crash, but we were much more surprised about Geraint Thomas being left out. Now obviously he hasn't shown the form that he could win the Tour de France this year, and whilst he would have been more than capable of being a big help to Bernal, as Bradley Wiggins recently pointed out on his Eurosport podcast, Thomas is now paid to win and win big, and not to help other riders. So he will now be the team leader at the Giro d'Italia, which starts a couple of weeks after the Tour finishes. Chris Froome, meanwhile, will lead the team at the Vuelta a España soon after that. Now, Richard Carapaz, who was due to lead the team at the Giro d'Italia, has now been drafted in for the Tour, and Ollie Bridgewood is desperate for him to ride for his own result, so we'll see what happens there. Aside from all of that, they also announced the signing of Adam Yates from Mitchelton Scott, who will therefore ride for a different team to his brother Simon for the first time since they turned pro. Ironically actually, Team Sky, as they were at the time, had expressed an interest in signing Simon from the under-23 ranks, but they didn't get him because they didn't want Adam at the time. Now they've got Adam, but not Simon. Anyway, moving on, there was some bad news last week for Jumbo-Visma. Steven Kruijswijk's injuries from the Dauphiné are bad enough that he will not be at the start line in Nice for the Tour de France this coming Saturday. A blow for the team, but not the end of the world, you've got to say. I mean, they've got ample climbers to support whoever ends up being their team leader at the Tour de France, and so they've drafted in Amund Grøndal Jansen to add to the engine room on the flatter stages. In other news, Larry Warbasse of AG2R and Leonardo Basso of Team Ineos are the latest pro riders to test positive for COVID-19. Both Ineos and AG2R took the necessary action after hearing the news, pulling their riders out from the National Italian Championships and the Tour de Limousin respectively. And I think it must be hard to get that news as a rider, particularly with cycling's history of another type of positive test. But I don't think there should be any stigma at all attached to a positive test for COVID-19. I'm absolutely sure that both riders were doing everything they could to stay safe and healthy. And so really it's just one of those things that couldn't be prevented. And I guess a new norm, really, in the modern world. On that subject though, the Tour de France organisers ASO have basically said that it's a 2 strikes and you're out rule for the upcoming Tour de France. So that applies for the entire team, not just the riders, but also the staff. Although apparently those 2 positive tests would have to come in the same week for a team to then be sent home from the race. And again, it's the reality of the world we're currently living in, I guess. But it does make it a possibility that the yellow jersey wearer might be removed from the race through no fault of their own. Fingers crossed that does not happen and that we actually get to the end of the Tour de France this year without any major non-sporting dramas. We'll get on to some better news now, though, shall we? After that terrifying crash at last week's Il Lombardia, Remco Evenepoel has taken his first steps. Remarkable, really, when you consider just how serious that incident was. He's also been exchanging text messages with his teammate Fabio Jakobsen, which is really fantastic to hear. And finally, a rumour. This was something I saw on Cycling Fans' Twitter account, and something I really hope is true. So apparently, in 2022, there will be a 1 week long Women's Tour de France, which starts on the same day as the men finish in Paris. How cool would that be? Firstly, it's a Women's Tour de France, which has been a long time coming. And secondly, in that lull after the Tour de France, where you don't know what to do with yourself because there's no racing all of a sudden, there's another Tour de France. Happy days. And apparently it was due to happen next year, but with all of the COVID-19 stuff, they've pushed it back to 2022. And on that note, I will wrap things up. Don't forget the big Tour de France preview is out on the channel tomorrow, and make sure you join us on the breakaway starting this Saturday. Oh, and for the team's presentation on Friday as well, which I haven't even mentioned yet. It's all going on, but I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.